Around a year ago, my friend made a game called Rolling Ball. It was this super basic 3D platformer that also had the most generic name that I could think of. The gameplay consisted of collecting floating green cubes and performing the most basic of platforming challenges. And while this game was unfinished, lacking of polish, and super simple, I still enjoyed playing it. Obviously, most of that enjoyment came from the fact that my friend had made it, but there was something else there too. Just the simple act of using WSD and rolling the ball around was just satisfying. I had a blast with this broken, unpolished game because it did movement right. Video games have matured a lot over the time that they've existed. If you look at movies, they've pretty much stayed the same for decades, and the technical advancements have been pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. Compare that to games, which have evolved so much even in the last 20 years. Even comparing the PS2 and PS3, it's clear there's a huge leap in power between these two systems. But games themselves have also changed, with entire genres being invented and others practically disappearing. Gamers demand experiences that are new and exciting, but sometimes that means that great ideas and concepts just fall out of vogue for whatever reason. For example, look at all these wacky and creative sports games that were prevalent in the 90s and early 2000s. But now, due to the dominance of series like Madden and 2K, sports games have become ultra-realistic cash grabs that in Madden's case are created exclusively by marketing teams and robots. It kinda sucks that only the most boring, lowest denominator sports games are allowed to exist in this current landscape. However, a similar evolution has been happening with first-person shooters for decades. As FPS games gain popularity and become one of the most saturated game genres in existence, we've lost a pretty amazing mechanic, the loss of which has created a stale and uninteresting landscape. A loss that may lead FPS games as a whole down an unredeemable canyon. The loss of skill-based movement. Skill-based movement is something that's hard to define, but would be something that allows you to move faster or jump higher or get to places that are unreachable with normal methods. The difference between this and something like an ability, such as, a double jump, or equipment like rocket boots, is that it takes skill to perform this maneuver with maximum efficiency. This gives players that know the tricks an advantage over players who don't, and that's where a lot of the controversy comes from. Because in some circumstances, a maneuver could be considered powerful enough to basically be cheating, especially if the developers didn't intend for that mechanic to be in the game. But if a mechanic takes a lot of skill and people take time to learn it, then don't they kind of deserve the advantage for mastering the game's systems? How is that any different from perfecting your cyber skills or learning the ins and outs of a particular map? Well, a lot of people would argue that the developer's intention matters, because skill-based maneuvers are often glitches or weren't supposed to be a part of the game. Today I want to argue why that doesn't fucking matter, and why skill-based movement needs to come back, because it makes games better. Firstly, I want to talk about a concept called death of the author. Essentially, it's the idea that the intention of a creator when making a book, or a movie, or a video game is irrelevant to the final product. The work exists independently of the author's thoughts, and all interpretation is up to whoever is consuming it. If you read a book and come to the conclusion that the whole thing is just a metaphor about that one time you shit yourself in second grade, then to you, that's what the book means. If you try to apply this idea to video games, it gets a little blurry, especially with less story-focused games, but it still mostly works. That means something like bunny hopping or rocket jumps or surfing, that's gonna be a part of the game whether the developers intended it to or not. And while obviously the developer can make patches and change the game, I think that unless it completely ruins the game, then maybe it's a good thing to make movement more dynamic and skillful, even if it's not completely intentional. But none of that matters if skill-based movement doesn't actually make the game better. After all, if a mechanic makes the game worse, then it probably shouldn't be in the game. In order to demonstrate how skill-based movement improves games, I'm going to talk about two of my favorite games, Overwatch and Shotgun Farmers. Overwatch is a hero shooter comprising of around 30 characters, which each have different abilities. And a lot of these abilities are based around movement. Stuff like dashes and rolls and charges are very common in this game, but the issue is that there's no real creativity or even skill involved. Each character has abilities, but there's not a ton a player can do to make these abilities better or use them better than another player. With the exception of Lucio, who is like the best character, the movement is so simple and clean, with no room for experimentation or fun. And the last time I checked, video games are supposed to be more enjoyable than filing taxes or being a Soldier 76 man. Overwatch is like using the fill tool in Photoshop. Inside the lines, boring and simple. But Shotgun Farmers is like having 5 crayons and a vegetable fetish. I'm not saying that Shotgun Farmers has the best movement of any FPS game, because that's far from true, but it definitely has pretty good movement. You move pretty fast, bunny jumping is present, and each weapon has enough knockback to make me at least consider having gay sex. And while a case could be made that Overwatch's movement is more complex, that isn't what makes movement good. If Shotgun Farmer's movement is a screwdriver, then Overwatch's is a button that just builds a house. But when you want to do something like building a shed, or actually have fun playing Overwatch, then a housemaker isn't going to do you any good. So if skill-based movement adds another element of skill and makes the game more fun, then why isn't it present in franchises like Call of Duty, Battlefield, or the other dozens of shooters that come out each year? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but the main one is that people don't really want it. Communities have shown that they want competitive, balanced, and glitchless experiences. Most people in the CSGO community would rather have everything just stay the same, with maybe a new map from time to time. And if you look at the games that implement skill-based movement, they often don't do very well, and don't get the attention and player base that they deserve. But you know what? I still want games to at least implement some skill-based movement, because it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And without games that make movement fun and exciting, then I feel like every game is just gonna be the same generic, boring slogfest. And I would prefer if that didn't happen. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications if you enjoyed this video, and maybe share this with a friend or your mom if she's really into skill-based movement. I'll see you next time where I drink a whole glass